Good afternoon and welcome. I'm excited today to talk to you about risk either in your independent support worker business or you might have a micro business. So I want to cover off several key areas I hope you are already considering. If you're not considering these key areas, then I really encourage you to focus on them as a matter of urgency in your business. So firstly, I want to check off with you if you are in either of those categories, either an independent support worker or you have your own micro business. What are you doing to manage risk in relation to that initial meeting you might be having with a participant? Are you doing a risk assessment when you make that initial phone call before you go out and have that meeting? So are you checking off key things around potential risks that you might encounter in the home of the individual? So what types of risks am I talking about? I'm talking about dogs at the location you might be meeting them. As meek, quiet, kind, and beautiful as dogs can be, they can also be a risk. So you need to be aware of any animals that might be in the home that may cause a risk. And I would encourage you, strongly encourage you, to be asking the individual whilst you are visiting the home that the animal be secured. So if we're talking a dog, can they go in the backyard or in one of the bedrooms? If there is a cat, same, could they be either outside or in one of the bedrooms? So any animals could be a risk. So you need to cover that off and put an outcome in place, a control measure in place to reduce that risk to you, or it could be a staff member that you are sending out. Is there anybody in the home that could be a risk to you or a member of your staff? So who is going to be present and are there going to be potentially any risks involved? You need to be determining that. Now, the way in which you could minimize that is you might, I know it's not very cost effective and not always easy, but it may be that two people go out and do the visit. Or if you do have any concerns, it may be that you meet in a more public place for your safety and the safety of your staff. So that's consideration number 2. Is there anything they need to know about the home, access to the home, or information that may be a risk to the individual? So we're talking about hoarder is a prime example. If they are challenged, but if they're living in a home where there might be issues with regards to access due to hoarding, then that is a consideration and something you need to manage. So you want to be checking through these things in your mind when you do that initial first phone call. Then you get out to the participant's home. Now, I want to ask you, are you currently doing an environmental risk assessment of the property? So what do I mean by an environmental risk assessment? Are you checking the surrounding areas and access? Is there any opportunity that you might slip, trip, or fall once you are entering or exiting the home? Are there any risks around steps that have got that are wooden and look like they're rotting? Is there anything moss on the ground or something that could be a slip hazard? Is there anything that you can visually look around as you're arriving at the person's home? Is there anything that could cause a risk to you whilst entering the home? When you're in the participant's home, you're building rapport, but you're also scanning around. And I do encourage you, if you're getting to the point in the conversation where you are going to be potentially starting support, you need to be saying, is it okay if I just check the main areas of the home that supports are going to be provided in, so I can make sure that we can provide support in the safest way possible? You're not there doing a big house inspection, checking in every cupboard or anything like that, but you are making sure that you are keeping yourself and the participants safe. So key areas to be checking is obviously the areas in the home that you or your staff are going to be accessing as part of the supports. Are there cables that are lying around that you could trip up? or a participant could trip up on? Are there rugs that are just bended in the corner that somebody could trip on? Are all the lights working? Is access easy? As the individual a smoker, is there any concerns with regards to smoking in the home? Bathroom access, if you're providing personal care supports, are you checking the bathroom and checking that access and support is going to be appropriate in that environment? You have a responsibility to keep yourself safe and anybody who's providing supports in the individual's home totally safe. I'd also encourage you to go through, I've got a bit of a crib sheet around key things that you need to be asking participants in relation to risks. Now, some of them won't always be applicable to everybody, but I'm talking about things like behavior. Are there any risks around behavior that you need to be aware of? Are there any risks around mobility that you need to be aware of? Are there any risks around other people that may be in the home that you need to be aware of? Are there any issues around risk in relation to the individual? Are they vulnerable in regards to things like money management? So I'd encourage you to have this crib sheet and stay with me if you're wanting more information about that. Some type of a crib sheet that you can go through and just remind you of different things that you need to ask. Some of them may not be appropriate, but at least you can check them off in your mind and make sure you've gone through all the potential things that may be a risk. Now, if you have those risks that have been identified, then you need to put a risk management plan in place. What do I mean by that? So let's say in the example of a dog in the home. So the risk is the dog. The risk management activity, so what you are going to be doing to reduce that risk of something happening in relation to the dog is, while supports are occurring, the dog will be outside or wherever it may be. So that's what you are doing to reduce that risk to yourself or to anybody that is going into the home. If participants question this and they're not happy and there's any concerns, please refer them to the fact that risk assessing and risk management in the home is a legal requirement that you have. So you have a requirement to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of yourself and the individual you're supporting. That is a legal requirement. So you can refer them to that if required, if they need any further encouragement in relation to the risk that you've identified. So make sure you record those risks and make sure you monitor them. So make sure that you are continuing to do those actions, and maybe something might not work in the future. And you need to review it and maybe look at it. I'll give another example of a type of risk that I actually haven't already covered off, is the idea of moving and handling. So are there going to be any moving and handling risks in relation to supports? So this could be moving and handling in relation to the individual. Maybe they have mobility issues, or it could be moving and handling in relation to things like carrying heavy bags of shopping. So if you are, let's talk about an individual having mobility issues. If they are maybe using a walker at the moment and you record that for the individual to mobilize around the home, they need their walker. And a few weeks down the line, you notice that their mobility has drastically reduced, then you are reviewing that risk and maybe looking at ways you might be referring them to their GP or to an occupational therapist or somebody who is involved in their care to reassess their mobility. So you're constantly monitoring and adapting and ensuring you're keeping on top of any risks. So please make sure you do an environmental risk assessment of the home if you're providing supports in the home. And again, if you're providing supports out in the community, you need to be doing an environmental risk assessment that covers the community as well. So are there any risks? Might the individual walk out into a busy road? Do they have awareness of risks out in the community? And if they don't have awareness, what are you going to do to reduce that risk? Also be very mindful and cautious of potential restrictive practices that may be in play, both in the home and in the community. So what do I mean by restrictive practices? Well, if you have, maybe you're supporting a you're due to be supporting an older gentleman who has early onset dementia, and the wife locks the kitchen because he can be sundowning. He could be going into the kitchen and potentially putting on hot hobs or something like that. If things are locked, or if baby gates are in place, or if there are things in place that restrict the movement of that individual, that is a restrictive practice. And that is a big red light that you need to be following up on as a matter of urgency. And you need to be making sure that you are either eliminating that restrictive practice, or that restrictive practice is being reported to the NDIS. So you must be reporting those restrictive practices because you want to be eliminating them. Anybody has any questions or concerns about restrictive practices, please ask me. It is a big minefield of questions and unanswers, and I can either answer and support, or I can refer you to the right direction in relation to restrictive practices. So be mindful as part of that environmental assessment, if you observe any potential restrictive practices, that you know what you can do to move forward. The best way to do that is to make the individual aware that that is actually a restrictive practice, and maybe to eliminate it. So you might say to the wife in this scenario, that's actually a restrictive practice. I would say that locking the kitchen is not ideal. Let's look at some strategies which can solve the dilemma you have, but be managed in a way that is not seen as a restrictive practice. So that's a whole different minefield. But please do that environmental risk assessment of the home, the community, wherever it is you are providing support, and put a clear risk assessment in place that you regularly review and monitor. Now, the other key thing that I want to talk about is, are you keeping yourself up to date in relation to annual refresher training? So things like moving and handling, things like restrictive practices. Are you finding and utilizing restrictive practice courses that make sure that you are keeping up to date? Are you doing things like first aid on an annual basis? What are you doing in relation to your own professional development that means that you are as competent as you possibly can be in relation to risk and risk management? So that is my top tip for you, to make sure that you do something around professional development, because things are always changing. Okay. Now, the really important thing I want to cover off today is what I call non-response to a scheduled visit. And 95% of people that I talk to don't even know what I'm talking about here, and are not really aware of their responsibilities. So what I mean by non-response to a scheduled visit, let's say, for example, you are supporting a lady who is in her 40s, who is a wheelchair user. She lives by herself out in the community, and you go out and you visit her once a week from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock. You've been going out for a while, and let's say one day you knock on the door at 10 a.m. and normally she's there, or she calls out and lets you know that she's on her way, and you hear nothing. So that is when your non-response to a scheduled visit is, your process, your procedure in relation to it needs to kick into place. So I would encourage you to have a document which is a non-response to a scheduled visit document. I'm going to verbally tell you what you need to do here. And if you want a little bit more help in relation to making sure you're implementing it properly in your business, then hang around as well. So step one is ask the individual, what do you want me to do in the instance where I turn up at your home and nobody answers the door to a scheduled visit? So my recommendation is, step one is to grab your phone, or if you have support workers, get them to call the office, call you, and you then try calling that individual. So you pick up the phone, try calling them, or texting them, or whatever means of communication you might normally have, and you still hear nothing. The next step is to either yourself or instruct your member of staff to actually just start walking around the home if possible, if they can look in windows, see if they can see any signs of life or any signs of what might be the situation or cause. The next step is maybe to knock on the doors of the neighbours. Sometimes this can be helpful, sometimes it doesn't show anything up, but if you knock on the next door's door and they say, oh yeah, I saw their aunt came and picked them up 20 minutes ago and they drove off, you know that somebody has sighted them very recently and they are safe and well. But that, you know, the neighbours may not be around, nobody may have seen anything, so you're still stumped and concerned for the welfare of the individual. I would encourage you then, or at the same time, so you might be walking around trying to find a neighbour, is to ask about who the individual would like you to call in the instance of a non-response. So it could be a family member, it could be a sibling, a parent, a child. So you would phone up that next of kin and you would say, hey, it's Helen here, I'm at mum's home, but there's no signs. We had a scheduled visit today at 10 a.m. and she's not here. And they say, oh, sorry, we forgot to tell you. They went away for the night last night. We're so sorry, we forgot to tell you. All good, no problems. Thanks for letting me know. As long as mum is safe, that is good. So, you know, or the individual may say, oh, that sounds a little bit unusual, but don't worry, I'm sure it's all okay. I will phone around. You head off home, leave it with me. I'll pop round now. They might be living locally as an example. So the next of kin may direct you to leave and say that they will take over the investigation in relation to what's happened to the individual. And that is then your leave of absence to leave that situation because you've handed over that risk to somebody else and they are managing it. Let's say you still not had any luck. So you've tried phoning the individual, no answer. You've tried looking around the home, no answer. You've tried asking neighbours, no answer. And this lady is posing a risk. So she has mobility issues. There's a chance she could have fallen over. So she could have fallen out of her chair or had something, some type of episode, some type of medical episode in the home that puts her at risk. Now, in this scenario, you need to dial 000 and you need to be saying that you are give an explanation. Lady in her 40s, she's home alone, concerned for her welfare, can't gain access to a scheduled visit. And you need to be talking through. So when you're doing this non-response to a scheduled visit conversation with the participant, it's step one is I will do this. Are you happy with it? I.e. walk around the house or give you a call, walk around the house, ask your neighbours, call your next of kin. What's the name of the next of kin? Do you have a second next of kin I can call? So you record those details. And then you say, in the instances of not being able to summon help from your emergency contacts, my procedure is to then dial 000. So you are just so you are aware, because as an example, if you call 000, what will happen is you will quite often see in whatever order they're closest to you, the fire brigade, the ambulance, the police turning up on the doorstep. So normally the fire brigade are the fastest and they do the least amount of damage with regards to, they just have this pretty cool device that just kind of manages to pop the door open quite easily. But they are able to get into the home and they will go through their process of checking and confirming to see whether the person is in the home or not in the home. But you have handed over that responsibility to the emergency, to 000, to the appropriate people. So that is no longer your responsibility and you've handed it over. 9 times out of 10 when this happened to me in the past, well, thankfully, I have, you know, there's always been an explanation and everything has been okay, but I have on occasion had to go through this process. You have a responsibility. You cannot walk away from that home if there is a risk around that individual. Also, I really encourage you, there's certain individuals I know you're probably familiar with and you've experienced it yourself who can sometimes let you down or they keep forgetting, whatever it might be. This is like a boy who cried wolf type. Ooh, I'm not sure if I just disappeared there for a moment. This is like a boy who cried wolf scenario. So if you have a responsibility to make sure that that person is safe, even if maybe in the past they have been a little bit flaky with regards to supports and services and being there when it is agreed. Because you cannot, if you leave that home and the individual you're supporting is lying on the floor inside the home unconscious, then that is on your back. That is your responsibility. So please don't take this lightly, and please ensure that you have a clear process in place for what you will do in relation to the risk. Now, some people might have like a key lock or something like that within the home, and that's absolutely fine. They might say, look, in this scenario, I'd rather you just got my key lock and came into the home. That is okay, but there's a number of risk areas that you need to consider in relation to that. Firstly, you are really theoretically trespassing in somebody's house. Although they're giving you permission, if you get that key and you go into that home, it's a very fine line and you are at risk. You really should not be walking into a participant's house without their consent. So it's a very, very grey area and not one that I would encourage. Also, I would definitely, maybe if you kind of unlock the door, open out and shout out and see, but I would not under any circumstances be walking into that home by yourself without, that's why I say dial 000, because if you're calling the police, then you're saying, look, I know they've got this, here's the lockbox, here's the number. You need to be walking into the home with that professional. They will go through their process of checking the environment, and you are reducing that risk to yourself, because you have a lot of issues around allegations of theft, trespassing, all of those types of risks come into play. And also a worst case scenario, you don't want to be that person who walks in and finds that an individual has passed away and is in the home. So please follow these steps, because they're really important to do it in this way. And if you don't already have a clear process in place, I would really, really encourage you to put something in play ASAP. Now, if you've scribbled down those notes and you're happy to move forward and put that into your business, then please do it now. If you'd like a little bit more support, and if you'd like to dive into risk management, environmental risk assessments, non-attendance to a scheduled visit, and you'd like some training and you'd like some documentation in relation to it, I'm going to put a link below, and I would encourage you to come join my community. So I've got a community where I provide support for $90 a month plus GST. And for that $90, you get access to information like this in a lot more detail, resources, and also you get 30 minutes of time with me a month to talk through issues in your business, anything that you're working on, any concerns you might have. So it's really a great value opportunity. And if you join into the community and link in today, you get the first 14 days for free. So you can come and learn this information for free. If you choose to then stop the subscription before that charge comes in after 14 days, that's absolutely fine. But I'd encourage you to stay, because that support, supervision, training, education to make sure you're being the best version of yourself is so important for the success for you, for your business, for your personal development and growth. So please join me in my community. And I will also put a link below to my policies and procedures bundle. So if you're looking for some policies and procedures, unfortunately, that doesn't cover off the non-response. You'd need to join my community for the non-response. But I look forward to seeing you in my community, or for you purchasing those much valued and needed policies and procedures if you don't already have them in your business. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I hope there looked like there might have been a glitch with connection there for a moment. Hopefully it was all good, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. Have a lovely day.